The Great Hall of the Galactic Council was filled with representatives from 100 different worlds. Strange creatures of all shapes and sizes sat in their designated seats. Some had scales, some had feathers, some had skin that glowed in different colors. But today, all eyes were focused on one person standing at the center of the chamber. Emperor of the Empire was a tall being with silver skin and large purple eyes. His people were known throughout the galaxy as peaceful traders and skilled diplomats. They had built their empire through words, not weapons. For 3,000 years, they had avoided war. But war had found them anyway. The Dominion had attacked without warning 5 years ago. They were a brutal species that lived only for conquest and destruction. Their ships had burned colonies to ash. Their soldiers had killed millions of innocent people. And no matter how hard they tried to negotiate peace, they refused to listen. Now the empire was dying. Their fleet was nearly destroyed. Their armies were broken. Every month they lost another world to the enemy. Emperor had tried everything. He had begged other empires for help. He had offered gold and technology and trade agreements. But everyone was too afraid to stand beside his people. Everyone except the humans. The humans were newcomers to the galactic community. They had only discovered faster-than-light travel about 100 years ago. In cosmic terms, they were just bobbies taking their first steps into a very large and dangerous universe. Most species had expected them to be weak and easy to ignore. They were very wrong. The humans came from a planet called Earth. It was a world of extreme temperatures, violent storms, earthquakes, volcanoes, and millions of predator species that had spent billions of years trying to kill each other. The humans had not just survived on this death world. They had conquered it. They had spread across their entire planet and then reached out to the stars. When the humans first met hostile aliens, the galaxy expected them to be destroyed quickly. Instead, the humans fought back with a ferocity that shocked everyone. They did not surrender. They did not run away. They adapted and learned and became stronger with every battle. Within 50 years, the Terran Republic had become one of the most powerful military forces in known space. Other species whispered about humans in fear. They called them. They told stories about human soldiers who kept fighting even after losing arms and legs. They spoke of human ships that charged directly into enemy fire rather than retreat. The humans had a saying that the other species did not understand but feared greatly: never give up, never surrender. Emperor had resisted asking the humans for help for a long time. His people were frightened of them. They valued peace and gentleness above all things. The thought of inviting such violent creatures into their territory made many of his advisors uncomfortable. But desperation had finally overcome fear. The Emperor had no other choice. The human delegation had arrived 3 days ago on a massive warship called the Fury. The ship was covered in weapons and armor plating. It looked like a predator ready to strike at any moment. When it appeared above many citizens had panicked in the streets. Commander Jake Harrison led the human delegation. He was their most decorated soldier, a hero who had won impossible battles through courage and determination. The Emperor had studied his history carefully. Jake had joined the military at 18 years old after his family was killed by space pirates. He had fought in over 50 major battles and never lost. His body carried the scars of a lifetime of combat. A long mark ran from his left eyebrow down to his jaw, a reminder of hand-to-hand fighting during the Battle of Seven. When Jake walked into the council chamber, the room fell silent. He was not the largest human in the delegation, but something about him commanded attention. His eyes were cold and alert, constantly scanning the room for threats. He moved like a hunter, quiet and controlled and ready to explode into action at any moment. Emperor stepped forward to greet him. He had to remind himself to stay calm. This human was here to help, not to harm. "Commander Harrison," the Emperor said, his voice echoing through the chamber, "on behalf of the people, I welcome you to our world." Jake nodded once. His face showed no emotion. "Emperor, thank you for receiving us. I understand your situation is urgent." "It is," the Emperor admitted. "The grow stronger every day. My people grow weaker. Without help, we will be extinct within 2 years." Jake studied the Emperor for a long moment. "We have reviewed your military reports. The situation is bad but not hopeless. Human forces can turn this war around if we act quickly." Hope sparked in the Emperor's heart. "Then you will help us?" "That depends on the terms of the alliance," Jake replied. "The Terran Republic does not commit soldiers to die without something in return. War is expensive, Emperor. What are you offering?" The negotiations lasted for 3 days. The Emperor offered everything he could: access to trade routes, advanced medical technology that could extend human, rare minerals from mining colonies, jump gate access that would allow human ships to travel across the galaxy in hours instead of months. Jake listened carefully to each offer. He asked questions. He consulted with his advisors. He never smiled or frowned or showed any reaction at all. His poker face was perfect. On the 3rd day, Emperor made his final offer. "There is one more thing," he said slowly. "To seal this alliance permanently, to bind our peoples together forever, I propose a political union, a marriage." Jake raised one eyebrow. "A marriage?" "My daughter, Princess, is of age to wed. She is the heir to the throne. If she marries a human representative, our alliance will be unbreakable. Our peoples will become family." Jake was quiet for a very long time. The Emperor could not read his expression at all. Finally, the human commander spoke. "And who would she marry?" "Someone of appropriate rank and importance," the Emperor said. "Someone who represents the best of humanity. Someone like you, Commander Harrison." Behind a silk curtain on the observation deck above the chamber, Princess felt her entire world shatter. She had been watching the negotiations secretly, curious about these strange human creatures. Now she gripped the railing so hard her knuckles turned white. Her father wanted her to marry that human, that cold-eyed warrior who looked at the world like everything in it was a potential enemy. She had watched the footage of his battles. She had seen him kill without hesitation or mercy. She had watched him walk through fire and blood like it was nothing special. Turned and fled the observation deck. Her heart was pounding so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. She had to find her father. She had to stop this madness before it was too late. But deep down, she already knew. Her father would not change his mind. The survival of their entire species depended on this alliance. Her fears, her feelings, her desires meant nothing compared to that. She was going to marry a human warrior. And she had never been more terrified in her entire life. Princess ran through the palace corridors without caring who saw her. Servants jumped out of her way. Guards called after her in concern. She ignored them all. She had to reach her father's private chambers before he made the announcement official. Her bare feet slapped against the cold marble floor as she climbed the spiral staircase to the royal wing. Her silver hair flew behind her like a banner. By the time she reached her father's door, she was gasping for breath and her legs were shaking. The guards at the door looked at her with surprise. They had never seen the princess in such a state, was known for her calm and graceful nature. She was the perfect example of dignity, but right now she looked like a frightened child. "I need to see my father," she said, "now." The guards opened the door without question. Emperor was standing by the window, looking out at the twin moons rising over the city. He turned when his daughter burst into the room. His expression shifted from surprise to understanding. "You were watching the negotiations," he said. "It was not a question." Nodded, she tried to speak, but the words caught in her throat. Tears were forming in her eyes and she hated herself for showing such weakness. "Not him, Dad," she finally cried out. "I am terrified of that human warrior." The Emperor's face softened with sympathy. He walked over to his daughter and placed his hands on her shoulders. She was trembling. "I know you are afraid," he said gently. "I understand, but you must listen to me. This alliance is the only thing that can save our people." "There must be another way," she pleaded. "Another human, someone less frightening." The Emperor shook his head. "Commander Harrison is exactly what we need. He is their greatest warrior, their most respected leader. If you marry him, the humans will be fully committed to our cause. They will fight for us as if we were their own family." "But I have seen what he does," pulled away from her father. "I watched the recordings of his battles. He kills without stopping. He never shows mercy. He walks through blood like it means nothing to him. How can you ask me to share my life with such a creature?" Emperor sighed deeply. He looked older in that moment, worn down by years of war and impossible choices. "Sit down, my daughter. Let me tell you something about humans that you may not understand." Did not want to sit. She wanted to scream and argue and make her father change his mind. But she had been raised to respect her elders. She sat on the edge of a cushioned chair, her hands clenched in her lap. The Emperor sat across from her. "Do you know why the other species in the galaxy fear humans so much?" "Because they are violent," said immediately. "Because they enjoy killing." "No," the Emperor shook his head. "That is what many believe, but it is not true. Humans do not enjoy killing. Most of them hate it deeply. They feel guilt and pain and sadness when they take a life, even the life of an enemy." Frowned. "Then why do they fight so fiercely?" "Because they love even more fiercely." The Emperor leaned forward. "Humans evolved on a world that tried to kill them every single day. They survived not because they were the strongest or the fastest creatures on their planet. They survived because they protected each other. They formed families and tribes and communities. They fought and died for the people they loved." The princess did not respond. She was listening despite herself. "When a human fights," her father continued, "they are not fighting because they enjoy destruction. They are fighting because someone they care about is in danger. That warrior who frightens you so much has spent his entire adult life protecting innocent people. Every battle he fought, every enemy he killed, was done to keep others safe." "You make him sound like a hero," said bitterly. "He is a hero," the Emperor replied simply. "Not the kind of hero we tell stories about not a diplomat or a peacemaker. He is a different kind of hero. The kind who stands between the innocent and the darkness that wants to consume them." Thought about this. She remembered watching Commander Harrison carry a wounded soldier on his shoulders while firing his weapon at attacking enemies. She had thought it looked terrifying, but now she wondered if it was actually something else, something she had not understood. "Even if what you say is true," she said slowly, "how can I live with someone like that? We are so different. Value peace and harmony. Humans value war and conquest. We have nothing in common." "You might be surprised." The Emperor smiled slightly. "Humans are more complex than you realize. They create beautiful art and music. They write poetry and tell stories. They form deep bonds of love and friendship. The same creatures who fight like demons on the battlefield will weep at a sad song or sacrifice everything for someone they love." "I do not believe it," whispered, but her voice held less certainty than before. "Then take time to learn the truth for yourself." The Emperor stood up. "The wedding will not happen for 30 cycles. Use that time to observe Commander Harrison. Talk to him. See the man behind the warrior. I think you will find something unexpected." Looked down at her hands. "And if I do not? If I still find him terrifying after 30 cycles?" The Emperor's expression grew serious. "Then you will marry him anyway, because our people are depending on this alliance, because millions of lives hang in the balance, because you are a princess of, and sometimes princesses must sacrifice their personal happiness for the good of their people." The words hit like a physical blow. She had always known that her position came with responsibilities. She had always understood that her life was not entirely her own, but she had never imagined that responsibility would feel like this. "I hate this," she said quietly. "I know," her father's voice was gentle. "I hate it too. If there was any other way, I would take it, but there is not. They are coming. They will show no mercy to our people. Commander Harrison and his soldiers are the only force in the galaxy that can stop them." After her father left, sat alone in the darkness for a long time. She thought about her future. She thought about the cold-eyed human who would become her husband. She thought about all the terrible things she had seen him do on the battlefield. But she also thought about what her father had said, about humans fighting to protect the people they loved, about the hero standing between innocence and darkness. She did not know if she could ever stop being afraid of Jake Harrison. She did not know if she could ever see him as anything other than a weapon wrapped in human skin. But she decided she would try. For her people, for her world, for all the millions of innocent who were counting on this alliance to save them. She would meet this human warrior face to face. She would look into his cold eyes and try to see the man her father believed was hiding underneath. And maybe, just maybe, she would find something worth hopping for. Or maybe her worst fears would be confirmed. Either way, she would know the truth soon enough. Stood up and walked to her window. Outside, the human warship hung in orbit like a dark moon. Somewhere on that ship, Jake Harrison was probably planning military strategies and reviewing battle reports. He probably had not thought about her at all since the alliance was announced. She wondered what he was really like when he was not fighting. She wondered if he ever smiled or laughed or showed any emotion at all. She wondered if there was anything soft inside that hard exterior. Tomorrow, she would begin to find out. Tonight, she would try to sleep, even though she knew the nightmares would come. Dreams of fire and blood, and a human face that showed no mercy. 3 weeks passed after the alliance was announced. The palace became a busy place filled with activity. Servants cleaned every corner until the walls sparkled. Cooks prepared for the massive wedding feast that would feed thousands of guests. Tailors measured and cut and sewed the most beautiful fabrics in the empire. Princess watched it all happen around her like she was a ghost. She smiled when people expected her to smile. She nodded when advisors talked about wedding traditions. She let the dressmakers wrap her in expensive silk and rare jewels, but inside she felt hollow. She had not spoken to Commander Jake Harrison since the announcement. She had seen him from a distance several times. He spent most of his days in meetings with military commanders, discussing strategy and troop movements. When he was not in meetings, he exercised in the palace training grounds or stayed alone in his quarters. Her handmaiden was the one who finally pushed her to act. Was a young woman with kind eyes and a gentle spirit. She had served since childhood and knew the princess better than anyone. She could see the fear eating away at her mistress day by day. "You cannot marry a stranger," said one evening as she brushed long silver hair. "You must speak with him." "I have nothing to say to him," replied. "Then let him speak to you. Let him explain himself. Perhaps he is not the monster you believe him to be." Laughed bitterly. "You have not seen the recordings. You do not know what he has done." "I know what the recordings show," said, "but recordings do not capture everything. They do not show what is in a person's heart. They do not explain why someone does what they do." The princess was quiet for a long moment. What if speaking to him makes things worse? What if I discover that he is exactly as terrible as I fear? Then at least you will know the truth. Set down the brush and placed her hands on shoulders. "Uncertainty is worse than knowledge, my princess. Even bad knowledge helps you prepare for what comes next." Thought about this advice for 2 days before she finally found the courage to act. It was late evening when she went looking for Commander Harrison. The twin moons were rising over the palace, casting silver light across the gardens. She found him standing alone near the fountain at the center of the royal gardens. He was looking up at the moons with a strange expression on his face. For a moment, hesitated. He looked different than she expected, not like a predator hunting for prey, He looked almost peaceful, almost sad. She forced herself to walk forward. Her footsteps were quiet on the stone path, but the human heard her anyway. He turned before she was within 20 feet of him. His eyes locked onto her instantly, sharp and alert. "Princess," he said. His voice was deeper than she remembered from the council chamber. "I was wondering when you would come." She stopped walking. "You expected me." "I expected you to want answers." He turned to face her fully. In the moonlight, his scar looked like a silver river running down his face. "I know what your people think of humans. I know you have probably watched recordings of my combat history, and I know this marriage was not your choice." His directness surprised her. Rarely spoke so bluntly. They preferred to dance around difficult topics with careful words and gentle suggestions. "Then you understand why I am afraid," she said. Jake nodded slowly. "I understand completely. I would be worried if you were not afraid. It would mean you had not done your research." "Are you trying to make me feel better?" asked. "Because it is not working." Something that might have been amusement flickered across the human's face. "I am not trying to make you feel anything. I am simply acknowledging reality. You watched me kill people. It would be strange if that did not disturb you." Took a step closer. She was not sure why. Perhaps because he was being honest with her instead of trying to charm her with pretty words. "Why do you do it?" she asked. "Why do you fight? Why do you kill?" Jake was silent for a long moment. He turned back to look at the moons. "When I was 12 years old, my family lived on a farming colony at the edge of human space. It was a peaceful place, good soil, kind neighbors. My parents grew vegetables and my little sister helped feed the animals." Waited. She had not expected him to share something personal. "Pirates raided our colony one night," Jake continued. His voice was flat, but something dark moved beneath the surface. "They killed everyone who resisted and took everything of value. My parents died trying to protect us. My sister died because the pirates thought it would be fun to watch her suffer." The princess felt her breath catch in her throat. "I am sorry," she whispered. "I survived because I hid." Jake's jaw tightened. "I was too scared to fight, too weak to protect anyone. I hid in a storage container and listened to my family die." He turned to face her again. His eyes were still cold, but now she could see something else in them. Pain that had never fully healed. "I joined the military because I swore I would never be helpless again. I trained until I became the best. I fought in every battle I could find. Not because I enjoy killing, princess. I hate it. Every life I take costs me something. But I keep fighting because there are people out there who cannot fight for themselves. People who deserve to live in peace. People like my parents and my sister should have been." Did not know what to say. This was not what she had expected. She had imagined a cold-blooded killer who felt nothing. Instead, she found a man shaped by tragedy, driven by guilt, fighting an endless war against his own memories. "Your people are dying," Jake said. "The will not stop until every is dead. I have seen what they do to conquered worlds. It makes what happened to my family look merciful." "And you want to stop them," said slowly. "I want to protect your people the way I could not protect my own." Jake looked directly into her eyes. "That is why I agreed to this alliance. That is why I agreed to this marriage. Not for power or wealth or political advantage. I agreed because your father asked me to help save innocent lives, and that is the only mission that has ever mattered to me." Felt something shift inside her. The fear was still there. It would probably always be there. But now it was mixed with something else. Understanding, respect, and maybe, just maybe, a tiny seed of hope. "I do not know if I can ever stop being afraid of you," she admitted. "I am not asking you to," Jake replied. "Fear is a reasonable response to someone like me, but I will make you one promise, princess. I will never harm you. I will never raise my hand against you. I will protect you with my life, not because it is my duty, but because it is who I am. Protecting innocent people is the only thing I know how to do." They stood together in the moonlight for a long time after that. They did not speak much. There was nothing more to say, but something had changed between them. The wall of fear that separated them had developed a small crack. It was not trust, not yet, but it was a beginning. When finally returned to her chambers, she found waiting anxiously. "What happened?" the handmaiden asked. "What is he like?" Thought about the question for a long time before answering. "He is not what I expected," she said finally. "He is something much more complicated." And for the first time since the alliance was announced, Princess went to sleep without nightmares. The day of the wedding arrived under clear purple skies. The great hall of the imperial palace was decorated with flowers from 100 different worlds. Thousands of guests filled the seats, representatives from across the galaxy who had come to witness the union that would change the course of the war. Princess stood in her private chambers, surrounded by her handmaidens. They had dressed her in a gown of silver silk that flowed like water around her body. Diamonds sparkled in her hair. She looked beautiful enough to make stars jealous. But her hands were still shaking. Noticed and squeezed her arm gently. "Everything will be fine, my princess. You have spoken with Commander Harrison many times now. You know he is not the monster you once feared." This was true. Over the past weeks, and Jake had met several more times in the palace gardens. They talked about their lives, their hopes, their fears. She learned that he enjoyed reading ancient Earth poetry in his spare time. She learned that he had once adopted a small furry creature on a distant planet and cared for it until it died of old age. She learned that beneath his cold exterior was a man capable of gentleness she never would have imagined. She was not in love with him. She was not sure she ever would be. But she no longer wanted to run away screaming when he entered a room. That was progress. "The ceremony will begin soon," one of the handmaidens announced. "We should make our way to the great hall." Took a deep breath and nodded. She was ready. Or at least she was as ready as she would ever be. She never made it to the ceremony. The first explosion hit the east wing of the palace. The floor shook so violently that fell against the wall. Her handmaiden screamed. Alarms began howling throughout the building, a terrible sound that meant only one thing. The palace was under attack. A second explosion followed, closer this time. Could hear weapons fire in the corridors outside. Strange voices shouted in a language she did not recognize. Then the screaming started. Not the screaming of frightened servants, the screaming of people dying. The door to her chambers burst open. His heart nearly stopped when she saw who was standing there. Jake Harrison. He was wearing his combat armor, a heavy suit of black metal plates that covered his entire body. His face was bare, revealing the cold determination in his eyes. In his hands, he carried a massive rifle that looked like it could punch through a starship hull. "We have to move," he said. His voice was calm despite the chaos around them. "Strike force." They breached the planetary shields and landed troops in the palace compound. "We have maybe 10 minutes before they reach this level." His mind was spinning. The guests, my father, the ceremony. Being evacuated through the lower tunnels. Your father is safe for now. Jake crossed the room and grabbed her arm. His grip was firm but not painful. "You are the primary target, princess. They know killing you destroys the alliance. I am going to get you out of here." The handmaidens were huddled in the corner, too terrified to move. Jake looked at them with something like sympathy. "Stay hidden, do not make any noise. Human soldiers are sweeping the palace, they will find you." He turned back to, "We have to go now." They ran through the corridors of the palace, had walked these halls her entire life. She knew every turn, every hidden door, every secret passage. But now they felt like a nightmare maze filled with smoke and fire and the sounds of battle. Jake moved like nothing she had ever seen. He was fast and smooth and utterly silent despite his heavy armor. His eyes scanned constantly, watching for threats. His rifle never wavered from the ready position. They encountered their first enemies at the junction of the Royal Wing. 3 soldiers came around the corner, their scaled bodies covered in black combat gear and their weapons raised. They saw Jake, and in the same instant that Jake saw them, Jake pushed behind him with one arm. His other arm brought the rifle up. He fired 3 times in less than a second. All 3 fell dead before they could pull their triggers. "Keep moving," Jake said, as if he had just swatted some annoying insects instead of killing 3 enemy soldiers. They fought their way through the palace for what felt like hours. More appeared around every corner. Jake killed them all. He took bullets and energy blasts that would have killed instantly, but he never slowed down. Blood began to leak from cracks in his armor. He ignored it. At one point, they reached a dead end. A collapsed ceiling blocked the corridor they needed. Soldiers were closing in from behind. Could hear their boots pounding on the marble floor. Jake pulled her into a small storage room and closed the door. His breathing was heavier now. The blood loss was starting to affect him. "I need 60 seconds, he said. "There is another route through the maintenance tunnels, but I need to check the path first." "You are injured," said. "You need medical attention." Jake looked at her with those cold eyes, but she could see something else in them now, something that was not cold at all. "I will survive," he said. "I have survived worse. My only job right now is keeping you alive." Before she could respond, the door exploded inward. A massive warrior charged through, his blade raised to strike. He was going directly for. Jake moved faster than her eyes could follow. He threw himself between her and the attacker. The blade meant for her throat caught him across the back instead. He grunted in pain but did not fall. Instead, he grabbed her with his bare hands and broke the creature's neck with a single violent twist. More enemies poured through the ruined door. Jake was out of ammunition. His armor was cracked and leaking blood from a dozen wounds. Any other soldier would have surrendered or collapsed. Jake Harrison was not any other soldier. He fought them hand to hand. He used everything around him as a weapon. A broken piece of furniture became a club. A fallen enemy's blade became his own. He killed and killed and killed, never stopping, never hesitating, always keeping himself between and the attackers. The princess watched in horrified amazement. This was the monster from the recording she had feared so much, but now she understood something she had never understood before. He was not fighting because he enjoyed it. She could see the pain in his eyes. She could see how much each death cost him. But he kept fighting anyway because she was behind him, because she would die if he stopped. This was what her father had tried to tell her. This was the difference between a killer and a protector. The last soldier fell at Jake's feet. The human stood swaying in the middle of the carnage, covered in blood that was both his own and his enemy's. His face was pale from blood loss. His body was trembling with exhaustion. But he turned to look at, and his first words were not about himself. "Are you hurt?" he asked. She shook her head. She could not speak. There were tears running down her face, though she was not sure when she had started crying. Jake nodded once. Then his legs gave out and he collapsed to the floor. Rushed to his side. She pressed her hands against his worst wounds, trying to stop the bleeding. She screamed for help, hoping someone would hear. "Stay with me," she begged. "Please do not die, not after everything." Jake's eyes fluttered open. He looked up at her face, and something that might have been a smile touched his lips. "Still scared of me, princess?" he whispered. Shook her head fiercely. "Not anymore, never again." Jake's smile widened slightly. Then his eyes closed and he went still. Held him in her arms and prayed to every god she knew that help would arrive in time. She had finally found the man beneath the warrior. She was not ready to lose him now. 3 days after the attack, Jake Harrison opened his eyes. He was lying in a medical chamber deep inside the Imperial Palace. Soft blue lights glowed above him. Machines hummed quietly as they pumped healing fluids into his body. The pain was distant and dull, pushed back by powerful medications. The first thing he saw was Princess sitting beside his bed. She looked exhausted. Dark circles hung under her purple eyes. Her silver hair was tangled and unwashed. She was still wearing the same simple dress she had changed into after the attack, now wrinkled from days of sitting in the same chair. "You look terrible," Jake said. His voice came out rough and dry. His eyes flew open. She had been dozing. When she saw that he was awake, she made a sound somewhere between a laugh and a sob. "You almost died," she said. "You took 17 separate wounds. The doctors said no normal person could have survived what you went through." "Good thing I am not normal." Jake tried to sit up, but his body refused to cooperate. He settled back against the bed. "How long was I out?" 3 days, reached out and touched his hand. Her fingers were cool and gentle. "The battle is over. The strike force was completely destroyed. Your soldiers arrived in time to save the palace." "Casualties." "Many guards died defending the guests. Some servants were killed in the initial explosions." His voice grew softer. "But the important diplomats survived. My father is safe. The alliance holds." Jake closed his eyes and let out a long breath. The mission was accomplished. That was what mattered. "I thought you were going to die," said quietly. "I sat beside you for 3 days, watching the machines keep you alive, and I kept thinking about how wrong I was about you." Jake opened his eyes again. "Wrong how?" "I thought you were a monster." Tears were forming in his eyes. "I watched recordings of you fighting and I saw nothing but death and destruction. I told my father I was terrified of you. I begged him to cancel the marriage." "I know," Jake said. "I understood why. You had every reason to be afraid." "No," shook her head firmly. "I was a fool. I looked at what you did without understanding why you did it. I saw the violence without seeing the love behind it." Jake was quiet for a moment. "Love is a strong word." "Is it?" Wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "I watched you throw yourself in front of a blade meant for me. I watched you fight until your body broke, just to keep me safe. I watched you kill a dozen enemies with your bare hands when you were already dying from blood loss. And when you finally collapsed, when you were barely conscious, your first question was whether I was hurt." She squeezed his hand. "That is love, Commander Harrison. Maybe not the romantic kind. Maybe not the kind the poets write about. But it is love all the same. The love of a protector for those he guards. The love of a warrior for the innocent people he fights to save." Jake did not know how to respond. He had never thought about it in those terms. He just did what needed to be done. He protected people because that was who he was. It had never occurred to him to call it love. "The wedding was postponed because of the attack," continued. "My father wanted to wait until you recovered. He also wanted to give me a choice." "A choice?" "He said that after everything that happened, he would not force me to go through with the marriage. If I truly did not want to marry you, he would find another way to secure the alliance." Met Jake's eyes directly. "I told him I want the wedding to happen as soon as you are well enough to stand." Jake blinked. Of all the things he had expected to hear, this was not one of them. "Are you sure?" he asked. "You do not have to do this. The alliance can work without a political marriage. I will still fight for your people regardless." "I know," smiled. It was the first real smile he had ever seen from her. "That is why I want to marry you. Not because I have to, because I choose to, because I have seen who you really are and I want to spend my life with that person." Jake was silent for a long moment. He had accepted this marriage as a duty, a necessary sacrifice for a greater cause. He had never expected to actually feel anything for the alien princess he was supposed to wed. But now, looking at her tired face and genuine smile, he felt something warm stirring in his chest, something he had not felt in a very long time. "Then I guess we have a wedding to plan," he said finally. The ceremony took place 2 weeks later, in a smaller hall than originally planned. Many of the dignitaries had returned home after the attack, but those who remained were the ones who truly mattered. Emperor stood at the front of the room, his silver face beaming with joy and relief. Walked down the aisle in a new gown, even more beautiful than the one that had been ruined in the attack. She moved with grace and confidence, her purple eyes fixed on the man waiting for her at the altar. Jake stood tall in his dress uniform, the medals on his chest catching the light. His wounds were mostly healed, though new scars had joined the old ones on his body. He watched approach and something shifted in his usually cold expression. His eyes softened. The corners of his mouth turned up in a small smile. The ceremony was simple and brief. Traditions mixed with human customs in a way that felt natural and right. When the time came to exchange vows, both of them spoke from the heart. "I was wrong about you," whispered as she placed her hand in his. "I thought you were something to fear. Instead, you are something to cherish." "I promise to protect you," Jake replied quietly. "I will keep that promise until the day I die, not because it is my duty, because it is what I want, because you have given me something I lost a long time ago." "What is that?" "A reason to fight for tomorrow, instead of just fighting against yesterday." The wedding feast lasted long into the night. For a few precious hours, the war felt far away. People laughed and danced and celebrated the union of two worlds. In the months and years that followed, the alliance between the Terran Republic and the Empire grew stronger than anyone had imagined. Human soldiers fought alongside forces, combining human ferocity with strategy. The Dominion, which had seemed unstoppable, began to suffer defeat after defeat. Commander Jake Harrison became a legend throughout the galaxy. Stories spread about the human warrior who had single-handedly held off an entire strike force to protect his princess. Other species began to see humans differently. They were still feared, but now they were also respected, admired, even loved. But to Princess, Jake was simply her husband. He was the man who read poetry to her at night, the man who held her when she had nightmares about the attack, the man who still could not cook anything more complicated than military rations but kept trying anyway because it made her laugh. He was still a warrior. He still carried the weight of his past and the scars of countless battles. He still had cold eyes that could turn lethal in an instant, but had learned to see past all of that to the gentle soul hiding underneath. 5 years after their wedding, the Dominion finally surrendered. The war was over. Billions of lives had been saved, and at the center of it all stood a human warrior and an alien princess who had found love in the most unlikely place. Often thought about that terrified girl who had begged her father to cancel the marriage. She thought about how wrong she had been, how blind, how foolish. She had been afraid of Jake Harrison because she only saw the surface. She saw the scars and the cold eyes and the violence. She never bothered to look deeper. She never tried to understand. Now she understood everything, and she was grateful every single day that her father had been wiser than she was. "Any regrets?" Jake asked her one evening as they watched the sunset from their private balcony. Leaned against his shoulder and smiled. "Only that I wasted so much time being afraid of you." Jake wrapped his arm around her and pulled her close. "Fear is a reasonable response to humans. We are pretty terrifying." "You are," agreed. "But you are also kind and brave and gentle. You just hide it very well." Jake laughed softly. It was a sound that still surprised sometimes. The fearsome human warrior, the terror of battlefields across the galaxy, laughing like an ordinary man. But that was the secret she had finally learned. He was just an ordinary man, a man with extraordinary abilities and an extraordinary purpose, a man who had turned his pain into power and his grief into guardianship, a man who fought not because he loved war, but because he loved peace, and he was willing to do terrible things to protect it. Princess Harrison had been terrified of that human warrior once. Now she loved him more than she had ever loved anyone or anything in her entire life. and she was never afraid again.